Hi, this is part one, and it's how the form of a street pattern layout, the form of a city, determines how much energy it consumes. Excessive use of energy endangers all life. Two major factors are poor street layout and low density sprawl, which is form and density. A number of architects have proposed in the past, and currently there are several who have proposals for linear cities. There's just one problem. The linear form is not as efficient as it could be. You want to, as a demonstration, you want to hold a belt out in a straight line and pretend it's a linear city, that it's 10 miles long and it has 1 million people. Now your worst commute, end to end and back again, would be a 20-mile round trip. Now hold the ends of the belt together, making a ring. The worst commute in the ring city would only be a 10-mile round trip. Let's demonstrate that. Let's say this belt is a linear city, and you live at one end and you work at the other. So your round trip would be twice this distance. If it was 10 miles, it would be 20 miles. But now, instead of building a linear city, we build a ring city. So the furthest point away from you, if you lived here, would be this point. Which, as you can see, is a midpoint for the linear. So they're both 10 miles in built habitat, and they both contain 1 million people. Your worst commute in the ring form will be half the distance, 10 miles. So the worst commute in the ring city, the worst commute would be 50% less energy expenditure. The average for the whole form would be 30%. For energy used for transport. So this is a little metaphor for your worst commute would be half. Circular circulation is perfect. It's a perfect flow. If you stuck a hub or a center or a city center in the middle of that space, it would no longer be efficient. You would have created spoke traffic, which is unnecessary. In a ring city, you put your city centers along the perimeter only. Centers are functions. They're not just locations. You need at least two, and they could be right across from each other if you were thinking in terms of a diameter. But again, if you put anything in there or roads across there, you're going to create a complicated interruption of what is a perfect flow, which is around the perimeter. And you only build on the perimeter. You never build within. Again, you have to have at least two centers. If you had one, a number of people further along the perimeter would be farther away from those functions. Besides, it's nice to have two centers. Each one could have a different personality architecturally. One could be cubist or rectangular, another would be circular for the piazzas and plazas. In the 1960s, I was reading a lot about verticality. I developed a bias against high-rises because of a book I read about problems with public project housing in Chicago in the 1950s. A project had to be destroyed before it was completed because it was too dangerous to live in. The problems were regarding crime and too many people having access at one point and no visual survey of the entry point, and a number of other factors. I'd read about the linear. I'd been thinking about Ebenezer Howard's plan, his diagram for the Garden City, which he came up with in 1902. And gotta get that darker. That's essentially his diagram. He put a hub in the middle and connected it with rail lines to a series of suburbs or garden cities which were along a perimeter. I was walking one day and I had a picture in my mind of his diagram, but with no hub and with no spokes. It was like that. And that's when I realized intuitively that a ring would be more efficient than a line, although I did not know how to measure it. In part 2, we'll go over design, how to design ring cities aesthetically. There's a professor of architecture who has put together an archive of community housing prototypes, and it's an excellent source for conventional architecture that has some density but is not extreme. Again, the form for a ring city gets 30% efficiency overall for transport energy. If you had modest density, you would have much higher efficiency rates.